Welcome to Trace Neuroanalytics, episode 4. This is for James Kroll. Thank you, James, for submitting this data. Check him out at Bay Area Peak Performance. And if you're interested in EEG analysis like this for yourself in a video entertainment format, you can do so at traceneuro.co. Thanks for watching. So this is my first look at this EEG. And we're going to start with the eyes open data. This was recorded on a neurofield Q21. And from the get-go, we can see there's plenty of muscle activity on the right side and the left side up front a little bit. And kind of an interesting pattern here at F8. There's this slower activity underneath that I'm curious about. So we're going to start to scroll through. We have eye blink, of course, and more of this slower stuff at F8, which does not, it appears to have some field in phase with what's happening at F4, but does not appear to be phase inverted with the right side. So curious what that is. We'll be cleaning up the eye blink with ICA and this EMG as well. And given the abundance of eye blink, we may, look at that. We may just do the ICA right at the beginning and clean it up before we really go through with a fine-tooth comb. And it looks like some of these epics have been removed. James mentioned that there were some sections with more noise. So when you delete sections like that, it can present issues if the case does go metalegal in the unlikely event. But it's not the worst thing in the world to do if it means that the ICA works more efficiently. And so long as you have copies of the original EEG, it's not a problem whatsoever. So we're going to run the ICA algorithm. I'm turning off the PCA denoising. We're first looking for a component that removes the eye blink, which this one does quite well, and does not seem to remove any of the real rhythmicity up front. So good. Next thing is we're looking for F7, which could be this. Let's see if that helps get the EMG out of there. It does. T7 is unclear. Well, actually, no, it's not. There it is. And now we're getting close. Right, F8 is doing this thing where it bounces, and I'm really not sure what exactly that is. Right, so if we take a peek at this epic right here, hypothetically, this could be a fast heartbeat, a pulse artifact. And I say fast because this is a second right here, and we're seeing basically 2 full pulses per second, which means the resting heart rate was at 120 during the eyes open. Depends on how much stimulants this person was on. That could be possible. So the challenge here is we'd like to get rid of some of the EMG that's there, but we also don't want to squish the real slow activity that's happening there. And that simply may not be possible. So, and when we look at the corrected EEG versus the excluded artifacts in some of the sections where there's more of this EMG, this is not doing a spectacular job. So I'm switching back over to the TON, and we're going to see if this does a more effective job cleaning. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Jay Gunkelman offers a free consult if it hits 4,000. I do not. Although we'll probably take a look at this tomorrow. Jump in to Trace Neuroanalytics sooner rather than later if you want to get a second pair of eyes on your data for free. I have my own weekly mentoring sessions, and if I don't have a case of my own to share, then we get to look at some of the cases that other people share with me. So, returning to the question at hand, are we able to extract the EMG more effectively with this algorithm? And are we squishing the other stuff if we pull out this many components? We're going to have to just let F8 be weird. And I'm okay with it. So it's going to make the scaling and the visual appearance of this a little bit wonky. But I'm not convinced that what's happening at F8 is not totally EEG activity. Now, it could be completely EMG activity, right? Muscle activity is not necessarily only fast. And this little spiky stuff here, makes me wonder if it's muscle activity. But you know what? We're going to leave it in and read around it. James mentioned something about bruxism, right? So it's not an insignificant feature. So let's stop fixating on the potentially extracortical stuff and start looking at what's happening actually in this brain. And overall, this looks like a relatively low voltage brain, right? When we scale for the actual EEG activity, we're at 30 microvolts. I'm going to drop the low cut to 1.6 to make it a little easier on the eyes. We see some frontal midline theta here. So I'm going to grab a screenshot of that. So the background activity is on the faster side. And this is an interesting little snippet here because we see occipital activity that's really in the teens. And we haven't yet really seen something in the classic alpha range. So what's that all about? More frontal midline theta. More of this F8 muscly stuff. Doesn't make it the easiest to look at, but I don't want to belabor the artifacting process. frontal midline theta and rare appearance of posterior alpha activity. Right, this is one of the few times that we see something within the alpha band actually pop up at the back of the head. What is this brain really doing? Now we're starting to see some drowsing. And as the drowsing is happening, there's somewhat of a reduction in the EMG. So we'll call this alpha drowsing. And it was quite a brief period of drowsing. And now we're back to this sort of general appearance of a lower voltage EEG, although now the alpha is coming in and out of the back of the head with more regularity. Again, we're seeing this low beta activity at the back of the head and at the front. Low beta because it's in sort of the teens. This is probably like 14 hertz. And if you want to scroll through slowly in WinEEG, you can use the arrow keys. So there's a little bit of drowsing happening, but given the presence of the muscle tension and the general faster background, this is presenting as someone who's a little bit more on edge than some of the other EEGs we've analyzed recently. Here's a rare burst of alpha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And let's take a look at the spectra. Uh-oh. Okay, so this looks like it's messed up, but remember that we didn't really get rid of what's happening at F8, so we're just going to have to make a note of that. So, yes, we see frontal midline theta. This, which is probably the jaw moving. This, which is the real alpha peak at CZ. And then this faster thing that we also saw, around 11 hertz. And then there's a 15.8 hertz feature, which we'll want to double check to make sure that that's not electrical artifact. So we're going to go back through and just take a peek at CZ. And realistically, we should have snipped out some of the sections like this. So we'll recompute the spectra because we don't want to be getting in this stuff that's really nasty. So CZ does look like it has this kind of like low level, but genuine content in that mid beta range. I don't think it's just a harmonic of electrical artifact. Let's just try to get some of this more egregious EMG out before we recompute the spectra. Stuff like this we don't need in there. Okay. Let's get rid of this and recalculate it. All right. So here we go. Having this faster peak likely associated with overarousal or anxiety, if that's something that this person is struggling with. And we will once again make our print preview of the spectra so that it fits within a single page. And if anyone out there in YouTube land has an idea as to why it takes so long for WinEEG to generate these images, let me know. This computer has a good processor, a good graphics card. I imagine it's just a single thread. Okay, here we go. So let's take a look at the eyes closed. Similar jaw tension. This time, we'll try to remove it and see what that does. And then go back and look at what we find. Although already I'm seeing some of this faster stuff, which is interesting. So scrolling to a section where there's a lot of this gnarly stuff, and it's not being pulled out very well with Infomax. So we will try again with the TON algorithm. There we go. Now let's hope that there's one that's similar for T7. Looks like there is. And we are set. So I'm just scrolling through to make sure that we didn't remove real stuff. And I can see that F7 has some squashing of what's happening, but not significantly. And here's some eyelid flutter that didn't come out. So we're just going to have to pull out stuff manually and hope that this is not too laborious of a process. Right, the cleaning is what's needed for us to get spectra that are good. And thankfully, as time goes on, it seems like the eyelids are moving less and there's less EMG, basically. So let's see what's actually going on here. Again, lower voltage and plenty fast, this brain, when we count the alpha activity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Holy moly. So fast alpha variant. Look at that. And there's some natural drowsing happening. We didn't totally get rid of the EMG at P7, so let's just snip that out. And so classic cycles of drowsing happening here. Alpha shows up and then it drops out. And it's fast. And with the spectra, we'll be able to see how it changes over time too. But we can take a little barometer here and we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So at this point, it's come back to the normal range for alpha. We're keeping an eye out for vertex activity, and I'm not expecting for this brain to go to sleep that deeply, given how much arousal there is. Nice big alpha squeak, followed by reduction in the background's power. Drop out of background activity. And we're just scanning to see if there's any focal features, anything gnarly. Here's a little electrode pop that we're going to snip out. In hindsight, we probably could have removed the EMG from the eyes open condition in that right frontotemporal region, but not going to worry about it. And here again, we see what we thought we would see, which is this dual alpha peak, as well as some frontal midline theta content. So again, this presents a weird, we can do it in amplitude in terms of microvolts to make it less skewed. And actually, I'm going to clear these so that we have a consistency in our units. So switching it to microvolts is just kind of nice because it allows things to be more visible when there's a wider distribution of amplitudes, which in this case means a bigger difference between the highest peaks and the lowest peaks. So we're just doing raw amplitude in microvolts as opposed to power, which is microvolts squared, so that we can see with our eyeballs more of what's actually going on here. And what about the distribution of this dual alpha peak? We see it in the central and basically all the sites except for the posterior sites. So that's kind of, I mean, the temporal parietal sites, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what that means, but left and right temporal and left and right posterior temporal zones don't want to oscillate with this faster frequency. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. So let's take a little bit of a look at the clinical information, history of trauma, depression, inattention, procrastination, mid 30s. So, how do those things relate? Well, we could say the P8 alpha dominance may be associated with symptoms related to PTSD. You know, as far as depression is concerned, dual alpha peaks may be associated with affective regulatory issues and or overarousal. And frontal midline theta may be associated with difficulty initiating tasks. So, what do we do about this? Well, right, neurofeedback, classic alpha theta, may help integrate past material and aid in calming the faster alpha peak. it seems to me like there's some work that needs to be done in integrating these two different speeds that the brain is trying to process at. And I'm not exactly sure how one goes about that, right? So one approach would be the eyes open PZ alpha squash. One approach would be infralow slash infraslow to aid in essentially arousal modulation. And also biofeedback. I would also inquire into medication, substance use, right? Anytime when there's this kind of dual peak, I do wonder if there's a drug on board. Um, and then I would also want to explore ERPs of hypervigilance. And if that's the case, then that may confirm that these issues related to trauma and depression may be more on the anxious, exhausted side of things, as opposed to the low energy side of things, which we sort of already suspect. So um, I hope that that's helpful. This is a little bit of a curious one as far as what to do about it. And maybe one of the best examples of dual alpha peaks that I've seen, or certainly one of the better examples of dual alpha peaks. And the question really is, what's happening in his mind when he's in these sort of faster alpha states? Is it anxiety producing? Is he aware of a sense of anxiety or hypervigilance? And if so, how do we then tease that out of the nervous system? So, yeah, perhaps a further conversation of what's going on in the ERPs could help shed some light on what's happening in this sort of a dual state kind of brain. So, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and please feel free to put those below in the comment section on YouTube. This is Trace Neuroanalytics. My name is Nikki. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.